Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I did spend one summer here at McMaster, so I guess that kind of makes me an alumnus. I took a course in history one summer while I was studying engineering. I don't want to talk too much about myself. I'm here to talk about someone named Cardinal Newman, Blessed Henry Newman. And I thought to start off, I would just show you some biographical information and something about his beatification, and then talk mainly about a book that he published called The Idea of a University. So let's see here.
John Henry Newman, one of the most important intellectuals of his day, was born in London in 1801. The eldest of 6 children, as an adolescent he decided to dedicate his life to God. Having studied at Trinity College, Oxford, he was ordained an Anglican priest in 1824, later going on to become a leading academic at Oriel College. There he came into contact with the so-called High Church, the part of Anglicanism nearest to Catholicism. At the time, this was a minority group. In 1841, the University of Oxford and 42 Anglican bishops condemned one of his works for being too Catholic. Newman withdrew and began to undertake independent research into the contents of the faith. 3 years later, he became a Catholic. In 1889, Pope Leo XIII appointed him a cardinal. Soon afterwards, at the age of 89, he died in Birmingham.
Now, maybe some of you are familiar with this term beatification, maybe some of you aren't. In the Catholic Church, there's steps towards becoming named a saint, and the final step before being named a saint is called beatification, and Pope Benedict beatified Cardinal Newman last year.
In the presence of a multitude of thousands, Benedict XVI beatified Cardinal John Henry Newman at Cofton Park in Birmingham. This was one of the last ceremonies of his trip to the United Kingdom.
Cardinal Newman's motto, Cor ad cor loquitur, or heart speaks unto heart, gives us an insight into his understanding of the Christian life as a call to holiness, experienced as a profound desire of the human heart to enter into intimate communion with the heart of God.
The Pope presented Cardinal Newman as one of the most important intellectuals of his time, an example to both Anglicans and Catholics.
120 years later, great crowds have assembled once again to rejoice in the church's solemn recognition of the outstanding holiness of this much-loved Father of souls.
John Henry Newman was an Anglican pastor who converted to Catholicism. Pope Leo XIII made him a cardinal, and he died at the age of 89. The inexplicable cure of a disease of the spinal column suffered by Dean Jack Sullivan was the miracle that enabled Cardinal Newman's beatification.
So way back in 1854, the bishops of Ireland invited John Henry Newman to found a Catholic university in Dublin. In order to expound upon his idea of a university, he gave a series of lectures in Dublin. His purpose was stated in 2 questions. First, whether it is consistent with the idea of university teaching to exclude theology from a place among the sciences which it embraces. Now notice here, Newman considers theology a science. The next question, whether it is consistent with that idea to make useful arts and sciences its direct and principal concern, to neglect those liberal studies and exercises of mind in which it is heretofore being considered mainly to consist. Basically, what was happening 150 years ago was a new university was being founded, and it was being questionable whether there should be arts and sciences, or whether it should just be, arts and theology, or whether it just should be for the sciences, especially medicine was a concern at the time, having a university with a medical school. And as we'll see, Newman actually makes a case that any university that calls itself a university must not only have a diverse curriculum, but that it must have some faculty or department of theology. Now, among the earlier lectures that he gave, one was entitled Theology, a Branch of Knowledge, and another was entitled Knowledge, Its Own End. And so there was an emphasis here on theology being the discipline which perhaps most exemplified a sense of knowledge that was a good in itself, not of utility like, say, engineering. So in 1855, 4 years prior to the controversy surrounding the publication of Darwin's On the Origins of Species, in which he presented his theory of natural selection, Newman gave 2 lectures on the subject of faith and science. The first was given to the School of Medicine and was entitled Christianity and Physical Science, in which Newman explains why there is not a conflict between theology and physics. The second was given to the School of Science and was entitled Christianity and Scientific Investigation, in which he proposes that the perception of an incompatibility between theology and science results in needless antagonism. In the lecture to the School of Medicine, Newman begins by identifying a scientific prejudice against religion and a religious prejudice against science. He prudently proposes that, although he says none of those present would be susceptible to either temptations, and I'm sure none of you here would be susceptible to those temptations, it is worthwhile to investigate the matter in order to gain a clearer understanding of how physics and theology relate to each other. His first approach is to divide knowledge into natural and supernatural, such that science is the philosophy of the natural world and theology is the philosophy of the supernatural world. This does not mean that the domains of knowledge are completely separate. There is an intersection between them insofar as facts about the natural world can be used to make inferences about the supernatural, and revelation can include truths about the natural world. Yet Newman claims that, quote, they cannot, on the whole, contradict each other. He even goes as far as concluding that theology and science, whether in their respective ideas or again in their own actual fields, on the whole are incommunicable, incapable of collision, and needing at most to be connected, never to be reconciled. His confidence in claiming that a collision between them is impossible stems from his characterization of physics as a field constrained to the study of sensible phenomena and the laws of nature, such that, quote, it never travels beyond the examination of cause and effect. Newman's scientific paradigm is based upon the principle of causality, with Newton as its prototypical practitioner. This is understandable, given that Newman lived at the end of the classical period of physics prior to the revolution of Einstein's theories of relativity and the development of quantum mechanics. Given his classical understanding of physics, Newman confidently stated that, with matter it began, with matter it will end. It will never trespass in the province of mind. It is said that the earth stands upon a tortoise, but the physicist as such will never ask himself by what influence external to the universe is sustained, simply because he is a physicist. Newman's point is that a physicist as such investigates efficient, not first or final causes. In other words, the physicist rightly asks how questions, not why questions. Although we may identify it as a form of mind-body dualism or mind-matter dualism, Newman's distinction would have made sense to a classical physicist of his day. Today, however, neuroscientists claim that the brain is their rightful domain, and many would balk at the suggestion that they are trespassing beyond their science with theories of mind. Moreover, contemporary physicists do not necessarily exercise the kind of epistemological self-restraint that Newman takes for granted. For example, in Stephen Hawking's book from last year, The Grand Design, written with physicist Leonard Milodinov, we find the claim that to understand the universe at the deepest level, we need to know not only how the universe behaves, but why. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do we exist? Why this particular set of laws and not some other?
He has been called the smartest man in the world, and now scientist Stephen Hawking is tackling some of the world's toughest questions. Do aliens exist? Is there really a God? Our Nick Watts sat down with him for a rare interview. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Robin. Well, this is it, the grand design. I am reading it slowly, I admit. And in here, Hawking and his co-author make a very, very bold statement. Apparently, our universe was created from nothing. Hawking writes in his book, it is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. Can you prove that God does not exist, or just that the universe could have been created without one?
One can't prove that God doesn't exist, but science makes God unnecessary. The laws of physics can explain the universe without the need for a creator.
Because there is a law such as gravity, he writes, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. There was, Hawking says, no hand of God.
When will the human race, do you think, meet its end? Are we destined to fail?
Life in the universe will cease to be possible when the universe becomes cold, dark, and empty in about 15 billion years. But the real danger is that the human race will destroy itself on a much shorter time scale. To have the chance of long-term survival, we will have to spread out into space.
To colonize other planets so we don't fight to the death over land and resources.
And in our universe, are we alone?
Life appeared spontaneously on Earth, or nearby, within the last 10 billion years. So one would expect life to appear elsewhere in the universe, though it might be a long way away. There don't seem to be any advanced intelligent aliens in our region of the galaxy, or we would have heard their radio signals.
Hawking, our world's most famous scientist, was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease in his 20s. He suffered for over 40 years. He is now totally paralyzed, save for a few facial movements.
Physics may explain the mysteries of the universe, but it is cold and unemotional, so I try not to let it affect my family life.
He has 3 children and 1 grandchild.
How do you read, research, and how long does it take you to actually write?
All the scientific papers I need are online, and I read them on my computer screen. Fiction used not to be available in electronic form, so I like to be read to. I still prefer this, even though one can now buy it online. Writing is very slow, but that gives me time to choose my words carefully.
Why do so many human beings seem to need a God?
People want to think there is something they can relate to, and which can make them feel they are not isolated, but are part of the larger whole.
Hawking has no need for a god, but it will take years, generations, centuries perhaps, for scientists to test his theory that our world was created by physics alone. Now, Hawking hasn't always felt this way, but he says the past 20 years of research and observation has led him to believe, as he told me, that God is, I quote, unnecessary. Robin.
Wow, fascinating. All right there, Nick. Thank you very much. And you can read some of Hawking's answers to the universe's greatest mysteries in an excerpt of the book at abcnews.com/GMA. We hope that you do.
Now, as if to challenge Newman's protest that these are questions for philosophers, maybe for a theologian, but not for a physicist. In the book, The Grand Design, Hawking writes, traditionally, these are questions for philosophy, but philosophy is dead. Philosophy is not kept up with modern developments in science, particularly physics. Scientists have become the bearers of the torch of discovery in our quest for knowledge. And, as if to offer a rebuttal to Hawking, Newman observes that, in the controversy between theology and physics,